I think we might get underway, mate. We might. I'll do a little bit of housekeeping. Might just do a little acknowledgement of country. So I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today, and also like to pay my respects to elders past and present. Steve, don't know if you know, but this is the first time we've done a 4-part webinar series like this. This is the first installment, so thanks for joining us. There's bound to be some teething issues. I'm going to take the blame for that, but bear with us if there are anything. But so far I can hear and see you, so that's always good. And you may have noticed that this session is being recorded. So this morning we're going to be talking about competitive advantage and specifically how candidate experience, or CX, can lead to that competitive advantage as your secret weapon. And we're joined by Steve Gard, who's just a bit he's given me an uppercut for what I described him as this morning. So I'm just going to say he's a world expert. He gets a little embarrassed about that, but a little bit of background on Gardy. He's had senior TA roles around the world, so in the UK, Middle East, and Australia for companies like BT, AIG, and most recently Good Start Early Learning. Good Start? It was. Yep. Good Start. Yep, cool. Yep. In 2020, during COVID, he founded the Circle Back initiative, which is employers across the world who are really committing to getting back to every candidate. And we know that that is a continuing need. And then in 2021, because he wasn't busy enough, he founded a tech firm called BenchmarCX, which benchmarks a candidate experience and compares that to your competitors. Before Steve gets underway, I just want to point out this is not a talk show. It's an interactive webinar. So please put your questions into the chat, and we'll do our best to make sure you leave here with answers to your questions. Over to you, Mr. Gard.
Awesome. Thanks, Dave. I can't see the chat box, so
yeah, I'll manage that one for you, mate.
You can manage that, and I'm going to share my screen because I've got some slides to take you all through. So bear with me 2 seconds. Hopefully you can see that screen.
Yep.
Okay.
Perfect.
Awesome. All right. Fantastic. So I tend to call my presentations, who cares wins, because who cares does win when it comes to candidate experience. And we've got some really cool data that we'll take you through in a second. But just to explain who I am, although Dave's done a fantastic job, great research. So I'm a former head of TA. I was head of TA for about 15, 16 years. Last proper job, as my kids call it, I was head of recruiting at Good Start Early Learning. So hiring 4,000 odd people a year. Before that, I was with AIG and British Telecom in the UK. One of my claims to fame in recruiting is I once turned down Apple, and that was because of a candidate experience reason. It was because they had an 11-stage recruitment process. So it's a good way of starting that it doesn't matter what brand you've got, candidate experience really does matter. I kind of still regret it a little bit, but it's an indication of what not.
I'm guessing 11 was too long.
11 was a bit too long. There were good interviews, to be honest. They were really good interviews, but it went on too long, and I went with someone else.
Yep.
Cool. So I'm going to take you. Oh, sorry. And yeah, as Dave mentioned, I'm the founder of BenchmarCX, which has just been announced Best Recruitment Technology 2024 by HRD Australia. Just like to put that in. Thanks, mate. And also the Circle Back initiative as well. We'll cover a bit of that later on. But what I thought would be useful is really to sort of underpin why, for me, candidate experience is just so integral to everything we do. For me, it's the foundation. It always has been the foundation of my recruiting strategies. And we've got some data in here that I'm going to take you through that will help you in your journeys of also influencing around candidate experience beyond just the recruitment TA team and HR team. It will, we want to ideally sort of really position candidate experience as a company team sport rather than an HR and TA one. Okay, so why does candidate experience matter? Well, for me, it trumps everything we do in recruiting. You can have a fantastic attraction strategy. You can spend fortunes on your EVP. You can have a brilliant selection methodology, but if the candidate doesn't feel it and see it and believe it and enjoy it, they're not joining you anyway. So all of it's for nothing. So it really underpins and trumps everything we do. And the impact actually goes way beyond the hire. Lots of organizations will look at candidate experience and say, well, we always fill our jobs. It's not really an issue for us, but actually we've got some data to show that candidate experience actually does go beyond the hire. It has a huge impact. And some of the data we'll talk about in that second point there is data that you can use to influence your hiring managers. This is a really important one. I really like this one because it's the only element of recruitment that levels the playing field for all employers. So what that means is, doesn't matter what brand name you've got, doesn't matter what budget you've got, doesn't matter what salary you're paying. If you can't compete with them, and sometimes you might not be able to compete with them, that's okay, because what you can compete with every time is candidate experience. It's almost free to do, or can be free to do, but it has a massive impact. So it's the one bit of recruiting where everybody starts at the same position. And that is something, a lever that you definitely need to pull if you don't have the budget and you don't have the brand, or both, or either.
So you're saying
Sorry, Dave.
that small enterprise can compete with large
100%.
enterprise. Yeah. Okay.
100%, 100%. Yep, 100%. So if you're not a well-known brand and you're up against potentially other brands that are well-known that are recruiting the same people as you or talent as you, 100%. This is the one thing that you can compete with on a level playing field. And the other thing is, candidate experience happens regardless. Doesn't matter if you intervene, measure, manage it. It happens regardless. There's a big difference between candidate experience and candidate care. Candidate experience will happen, as I say, regardless. Candidate care won't. But really, for you to give a good candidate experience and deliver candidate care, you have to manage it. So it's something that's happening all the time. You just need to decide whether you want to leave. I'm using the analogy of carbon footprint, right? So if you whenever you recruit, you leave a candidate experience footprint, regardless, for every single candidate. It can either be a nice barefooted one along the beach in the sand, or it can be a muddy, great big footprint on a carpet. But you are going to leave one. It's down to you to decide which one you want to do.
Yeah, good analogy.
Thank you, mate. Okay, so I'm going to go through some data because these are data points that you might find useful and you can take away. But this really underpins why candidate experience is important. It's great to have an opinion about it, but I think the way to influence people is with fact. So here's some facts. 72% of people have withdrawn from a recruitment process due to a candidate experience related reason. That could be speed of response. It could be quality of application process. It could be quality of interview. It could be lots of different things. But 72% of us have withdrawn from a recruitment process due to a candidate experience related reason. I've certainly done it multiple times.
Guilty.
78% of people will factor in candidate experience when evaluating how much an organization cares about its employees. So candidate experience is essentially a reflection of employee experience. Candidates are looking at this to say, what is it going to be like to work in this organization? And I was doing a presentation yesterday and somebody said, oh, what's your view on where job ads say only shortlist applicants will be responded to? And my response is, that gives me a reflection of what it's like to work there, even in a job ad. So candidate experience starts at job ad stage. It starts before you even know it started. Huge, huge, huge element here.
Do you think in the same way that an employer, puts emphasis on spelling errors in a CV, like this is indicative of the level of detail or performance and a candidate is going to apply when they work for us. It's the same sort of thing, right? Like candidates are
Yeah.
doing the reverse to the employer. They're kind of going, hey, if you're treating me like this now, if
Yeah.
it's so hard, if I've got to go through 11 steps, or, if I have to retype my CV, even though
Yeah.
I've just uploaded it, seriously, what am I doing here?
Yeah. And one of the on that, one of the biggest um challenges that I see around that is for tech firms. So, tech firms say, hey, we're really innovative around our tech, we're technology first, we're leading the world in technology. And then their applicant tracking system or their application process doesn't reflect that. It's really clunky. It's
Mhm.
really, it breaks. That kills EVP immediately. That is still candidate experience, right? So it's like, well, why would I apply to this innovative tech company who can't even get their application process or technology working? So it's huge.
Yeah.
83% of people will reconsider working for an organization if they have a negative candidate experience. So a huge number. Um, this impacts two things. One, it impacts obviously your ability to hire, so that offer accept ratio, but hugely it impacts your ability to talent pool. You might think you're talent pooling, and I'll come to this in a bit. You might think you're talent pooling, you're not. If you don't deliver a good candidate experience, all you've got is a database of people that used to like you. You're not talent pooling. So huge number of of people will reconsider because of the experience that they have. This we can actually even put some um, financial data around for your CFO.
Okay.
Um, uh, you know, being able to provide a good candidate experience means that we don't have to necessarily spend more on attraction because we've got a very vibrant, happy talent pool. 49%, 50% of people will turn down a job offer. So if they've had a poor candidate experience, 50% of people will turn that down. 88% have actually left a consumer. So this is moving into data that really will help you position candidate experience. Certainly if you're a B2C organization. So 88% of us have left a consumer brand as a customer after a poor candidate experience. I've left a bank after a terrible candidate experience. It was a bank I was with for 15, maybe 20 years. It was a bank my granddad worked for 20 years. And I had an awful candidate experience and closed my accounts within a week of that happening. 88% of us have done it. And
Uh,
in this, yeah, and in this environment now of us being able to easily change energy providers or easily change insurers, I get calls every day about changing my electricity provider. It's so easy to swap out now. This is a
yeah.
huge impact. And we've now got on benchmarks the ability to put a dollar figure on that as well. But huge if you are if candidates could also be customers.
Yeah. Makes sense.
70% of people, quality of hire increases by 70% when companies invest in candidate experience. So again, this is going beyond the hire. The quality of hire increases. Companies with great candidate experience see 24% new hires staying for at least 3 years. So again, goes beyond the ability to hire. This is all moving into retention. We got some more info on that in a second.
And
Um,
I assume that's lower percentage for those that have a poor candidate experience. They're looking for a job almost before they even start working with.
yeah, we'll show you the impact of that in a second and why that might be. But yes, you've
Yeah.
got bigger risk of early turnover in employees if they've had a poor candidate experience but still join.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Uh, this one's been around for a while, but 72% of candidates will talk about their candidate experience directly with friends and family. That's probably likely to be a little bit higher than that, especially if it's been a negative one.
Yeah.
Probably, in fact, it's
Like
probably
you've told thousands of people about your Apple experience.
no, not thousands, but it's yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. That totally makes sense.
but also on the flip of that, you know, we know that where it's been a really good candidate experience and people have enjoyed the process, they also talk to their family and friends about it. So I had a great experience. I'd recommend applying there. I didn't get the job, but it was really good. So that word of mouth stuff is really important. One of the missed opportunities we often see is that often with internal recruitment, we don't focus on the candidate experience as much as we do external recruitment. I've been guilty of that in the past. Hiring managers certainly are guilty of that as well. It's because obviously they feel, well, they're already in the organization. You know, we haven't got to do as much work, but actually this data shows that you do. So 61% of people who applied for a role internally have also applied externally at the same time. So this means that your internal candidate experience really needs to be as good as an external candidate experience. And why is that? This bit of data tells you why. 50% of people said that the pivotal reason they joined their current employer was because the way they made me feel during the recruitment process.
Mm.
So going back to that internal external dynamic, if the external company, the other company, are making them feel more wanted, giving them a better candidate experience than the internal one, you've got a much higher risk of losing that person. So it's not just the ability to hire that role, that's a retention issue as well.
Yeah.
But this is huge, and this is why benchmarking candidate experience is really important, because um, uh, this next bit of data I'm going to show you will underpin that. Just to explain this bit here, only 19% of people said it was the salary as the pivotal reason I joined, and 31% said it was the role. So a really big part of this way you make them feel is a huge element of hiring who you want to.
Yeah, I totally subscribe to that. For me, I think the last two jobs, it's been really important who I'm working for. And that largely comes out in an interview, right? Like I don't
Yep.
know the people I'm working for, like I might be working for. So I'm judging a lot on just, they're judging me, obviously going, hey, can he do this job? And I'm really trying to go, do I actually want to hang out with this person more than I hang out with my wife?
Yeah.
And how do they make me feel in that 1 or 2 hours of interviews? Hopefully it's no longer than
Yeah.
that. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, that's the whole crux of what you're trying to work out, right? So you don't
Yeah.
know, can they sell? Can they dig a ditch? Can they da da da? You're not doing that in an interview. You're literally just trying to go, am I going to get along with this person?
Yeah.
Is the rest
Yeah.
of the team going to down tools to help them be better? Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
I really like that stat, Steve.
Cool. So underpinning why this is important is this next bit of data, that 42% of people make, and this is from a poll we did actually about 3 or 4 months ago. So 42% of people made 6 or more applications at the same time as the application they made to their current role, right? What that means is that you've got to be making them feel this bit behind. You've got to really focus on that, but you're up against five or six other roles minimum. So how do you know that you're making them feel the best? How do you know that your candidate experience is better than the others? And that's where saying a great candidate experience isn't enough anymore. It's got to be competitive. This data here, only 18% made the one application. So a huge number of people are talking to multiple organizations at the same time. This is why measuring candidate experience for all those reasons and all those bits of data I've just given you is really critical. And just moving away from that slightly is this next bit of data, which is really important, I think, is that 52% of people have felt they experienced some form of bias or discrimination during interviews. Now, interestingly, 70% of those people didn't report it or didn't have a mechanism to report or feedback that experience to the employer. And again, this is another reason why measuring candidate experience is really, really, really important. It's not just about you know, are we competing with or are we on a par with other employers? It's the ability to uncover what is happening in parts of the process you as HR and TA don't get to see. So really, really critical element.
Do you think, sorry, I was going to play devil's advocate there. Do you think by nature, the process of recruitment is discriminatory? Like, maybe I'm not using the right word there, but someone's getting the job and someone isn't, right? We are going to discriminate based on something, even if it's just skills or experience level. So could it actually be higher than that? Sorry, I'm not trying, I love your stats. I'm just trying to.
Yeah.
I
I mean, yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be discrimination around protected.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
Yeah.
And you know, and it doesn't have to be, again, it doesn't have to always be, and it probably will always be sort of that unconscious bias
Yeah,
as
sure.
well.
I mean, I like that. I totally agree on this last point, though. I think you can get around that. And, you know, if you did give some feedback mechanism to the
Yeah,
candidate so that they can feed that back, then you can determine whether it's unconscious, whether it's
yeah,
something you need to address, or it's like, hey, you were just the silver medalist, you missed out. I'm sorry.
yeah,
Kind of. You won't
yeah,
know without being able to capture that.
yeah.
Okay.
And actually, what we find with our data on benchmarks is that we simply asking the question of, hey, what was it like, is actually a really cool candidate experience play, regardless of whether they complete the survey or not. Just that sort of indication
Yeah.
of, sorry, you've been unsuccessful, but hey, look, we really care what you went through. It's a really great employer brand play, simply saying we'd like to know, regardless of whether you get the data or not.
Yeah.
It's very, very powerful. And I've got some a bit more on that in a second, but I'm gonna have to move on because we're
Sorry, mate. Yep. I must have
no,
talked
no,
about.
good questions though, Dave. Okay, impact beyond the hire. I want to talk a little bit more about this. So, a few years ago, BHP did a study on this. This is really, really interesting stuff. And this is one that you should be using with your hiring manager. So BHP did a study and they said positive candidate experience equals a better employee experience. And what they found is candidates who had a positive candidate experience joined BHP with a high level of engagement, a higher sense of belonging, and a higher level of performance than candidates who had a not so favorable candidate experience but still joined, right? So those that had a less favorable candidate experience had a much lower levels than those that had a good candidate experience. So you might
Wow.
think that's okay because maybe they'll improve it over time. The big kicker is that gap never closed. It
Mm.
never closed between the two. And this has a massive then impact on turnover, engagement, performance. So it has a big, big impact beyond the hire.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all. I mean, it's great to have it reinforced, but I think when I went to uni, there was a lot of research then around that kind of candidate experience leading to engagement levels, and engagement drives performance, right?
Yep.
It never gets higher generally than the day you start. Like
Yep.
you're like super pumped. And
Yep.
then it can flatten off or tabletop, but it rarely does that hockey stick.
Yeah.
So yeah, you start low, you're gonna.
Yeah.
There's only one way you're gonna
Well,
go.
yeah, and that's for me, it's the big bit of data there. That gap never changes, right?
Yeah.
So it never improves. Um, Companies that invest in a seamless, respectful recruitment process. Another one is around are 3 times more likely to retain employees. So they've got a higher chance of retaining employees. I talked quickly previously on talent pooling. This is the difference between two different types of talent pooling. You can't have a great talent pool without a positive candidate experience. All you're going to get is a murky, dirty talent pool.
What do
So,
you mean by that?
what I mean by that is candidates have you you will have just a database of people that used to like you if you don't give them a good candidate experience, right? So you think you're talent pooling. So you fall into this trap of thinking you're talent pooling, but you're actually not. What you're doing is just
So
storing.
we've got 100 people apply for our job.
Yep.
One person gets it. 99, the candidate experience wasn't that great, but they've come
Yep.
into our talent pool now.
Yep.
And then we think in 3, 6 months' time, we're going to approach those 99 people about the next job, and they've already moved on.
Yeah, or they're not interested, or they're one of those 80% that said they'd reconsider working for that organization. So this is a bit of a trap because TA teams think they've got a talent pool, but they
Yeah.
haven't. They've just got a database of disgruntled people.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're delivering a good positive candidate experience as a foundation, obviously you've got to work on your talent pool, but as a foundation, you've got to have a positive candidate experience for it to be classed as a talent pool and not a database. Big difference between the two. So if you deliver a great candidate experience, you're going to be able to dip into your talent pool. They're going to be more engaged with you rather than, well, you never came back to me, or it took 6 months, or the interview process was biased, or whatever it might be. So
I'm getting
candidate,
asked, Steve, I'm getting asked a couple of questions here,
uh,
and LJ,
right,
the I don't know what we call her, the producer, let's say, is just asked me to ask you a couple of questions. So I'm just
sure.
going to interrupt you for one moment.
Okay.
Steve, what are the most common quick wins you see companies making in their candidate experience that make a big impact?
The biggest one is you've got to measure candidate experience one way or another, because without it, you don't know what to fix, you don't know what to focus on. Candidate experience is huge. It's a massive, massive subject if you think about it, because it actually shouldn't be called candidate experience. It should be called candidate experiences, because you've got multiple candidates experiencing different things in different ways. If you don't measure it, you've got no chance of getting it right. We've seen customers on benchmarks that have started the benchmark against other employers and be able to see, actually, we need to improve to get to X, Y, and Z. And you can't improve and do really well on this unless you measure it. That's the number one thing to do.
Okay. Anything else that's really common after that, or that's the starting point, and then you can address it.
Well, and the other thing is really positioning and having a strategy around candidate experience as well. So again, not just letting it happen, strategically managing that, and that involves making sure that your stakeholders, your hiring managers, are involved in that as well, so they understand the impact. And that's why we've got all those bits of data there, is because it's not just a TA responsibility. Candidate experience doesn't just we don't we probably own the strategy, but we're not responsible for the outcome. We've got everybody in the organization is responsible for candidate experience. So we need to make sure that hiring managers are aware of the impact of getting it right and getting it wrong. And having those data points I've already shown you, but also the data points you get from measuring your own candidate experience is really cool. So one of the key things we find on benchmarks now is that, because you can actually see, how do I compare against other organizations hiring this skill? Recruiters are taking this data into hiring manager meetings and saying, hey, look, when we're hiring the position, or when we have hired the position, we're a little bit lower than other organizations hiring the same position when it comes to the ability to sell the role. They can see that data in real time. So
Right.
can we work through some sort of, key messages that we can give to candidates, and how we're going to do that? Could be lots of different things.
Okay.
Yeah.
Another question, sorry, for B2C companies, this is from Anonymous. Has a study ever been done that quantifies and correlates the impact of poor CX in the hiring process with lost sales?
Yes. So I think it was 2016 or 2017, Virgin Media in the UK did a study on this, and it's actually been the only one that I've ever seen on this. So they calculated that, and so Virgin Media, for those that don't know, it's a bit like sort of Foxtel. satellite TV or cable TV, all that sort of stuff. They were finding that candidates who are going into their recruitment process as customers, having a poor candidate experience, exiting and cancelling their contracts. They actually calculated it was costing them, excuse me, $5.5 million a year just due to poor candidate experience.
Wow.
Now the good thing is that the good thing is that there hasn't been another study like that. We've now built that capability in Benchmark. You can see that in real time across every single element of your recruiting process and see what the dollar impact is. And the C-suite love that data. They love to be able to see what is the revenue impact, both positive and negative, because we can also show you what potential new revenue you've generated from a non-customer coming in and having a great candidate experience and becoming a brand advocate.
Speaking of C-suite, I know you consult to a lot of big and mid-sized companies. If I was a CEO of let's say a 500 headcount business, how frequently should I apply for a job at my business?
Good
Anonymous.
question. Yeah, good question. I mean, it's 500 people. I mean, I would do it sort of every quarter to 6 months. But you know,
Anonymously apply and see what happens.
anonymously apply. So we do that as part of Circleback actually. So we make applications every time somebody wants to become part of the Circleback initiative, and we do that every time they want to renew their membership as well. It does tell you a lot, but yeah, I'd make that recommendation. Do it as much as you can.
Okay, cool. Steve, we're going to wrap up here, I think, pretty soon. I think we're running out of time. If there was one or two things that you really wanted to, is there anything we really need to, we've missed out on? We good? Are you good to wrap up?
No, I mean, I'll send these slides through so you can share them, but just quickly, just to really underpin why measuring candidate experience is really important and why it will give you actually a competitive edge. I just want to show you that this slide, these next two slides, because it will give you a competitive advantage. Even if you don't use benchmarks, if you use SurveyMonkey, it will. I asked this question a couple of months ago. How do you rate your candidate experience? This was for a group of 200 recruiters on a webinar I was running. 27% said it was excellent, 73 said it was average, and 0 said it was poor. The real kicker with that is 60% of those people didn't measure it. So how do they know this? Equally on that, we also asked on another webinar, it showed that 96% of employees said their recruiting teams have a focus on improving candidate experience, but only 48% measured it. But my point on this is, if you start to measure candidate experience, you're beating already between 48 and 60% of your competitors, and it will give you a competitive advantage. 100% will give you a competitive advantage.
And would that be the one big takeaway that you'd like any listeners to take?
I think the one big takeaway is if you're not measuring it, start measuring it. Because you can't do anything about candidate experience while understanding what is happening. And you'll start to, and the reason you do it, you start to sort of go off and think, oh, I think I need to do this, or there's more noise coming from this department or whatever, and you just fix it, and it might not be the right thing to fix. So really, measure it and you'll find out.
Awesome. Thank you. Quick wrap up. I think I tried to scribble down some notes whilst listening and asking questions. So my wife will tell you I'm not very good at multi-skilling, but candidate experience trumps everything. I really like CX levels. CX candidate experience levels the playing field for small and relatively unknown brands versus large, well recognized brands. And as you were going through, I was thinking about brands I'd worked for that are probably unrecognized that have definitely done that. And then 42% of applicants, including your internal candidates, are applying for 6 or more roles. I mean, that'd be horrifying for a lot of people. So I think getting that candidate experience right is paramount. Mate, thanks so much for joining us, Gardy. I really appreciate it. Black t-shirt next time. I'll send you a memo. But
send me a t-shirt.
I will. I'll send you a t-shirt. And for anyone that's listening, we've got another webinar, I think, coming up Let me just grab the dates here. Next Tuesday at 10:30 Sydney time, with Connor from Team Taylor, and he's going to talk about building the perfect candidate experience. So hopefully he's been paying attention to Gardy today. All good. Thanks again. Really appreciate it. We'll send out a recording to anyone who registered. Cheers, Steve.
Thanks,
See you, mate.
everyone.